Hi, this is Vernon. I'm back with Chasing Time Travelers Part 21. So now we're in Cairo at the Cairo Museum. This is these images are from back in 2010, and as I said before, the reason I went to Cairo was to see what the shadow of the Sphinx did at sunrise on the first day of summer, and I guess I never told you what it did. I've got a photo in one of my books. The photo is not very good. It's with an old, cheap disposable camera. But it looked to me like there was a 20-minute video made of shadows that basically showed this guy trying to climb the Sphinx. And then as it ends, he sort of looks up. He was trying to climb the Sphinx the way a person mounts a horse. In other words, the shadow would have been 30 feet tall. And so the smart guy that I mentioned to you before, so I invited him to join me on the roof at Gouda Fayed's, and this roof is like a giant balcony, right? It's flat and I mean it's Egypt, it's a desert, right? It doesn't rain a whole lot there, and so it's a perfectly safe place. And so I invited him. I said, meet me tomorrow morning at I think it was like 6 o'clock, 6 a.m. and I want you to watch the Sphinx with me. But I didn't tell him what to look for. He said, okay, sure. And so he met me there on the roof as the sun was coming up. And he sat there quietly watching. And then when there were a few minutes left to what the shadow was going to do, because he didn't indicate that he saw anything special, because I had told him to watch the Sphinx. That's all I told him. And then when there was about 5, 10 minutes left, I said, do you see anything? He says, no. And I said, look for what looks like a man who's trying to climb the Sphinx. And he looked for a moment and he said, I see it. Right? It took him maybe 5 seconds, maybe 10. He said, I see it. Um, the really interesting thing is that a few years later, I found out, well, let me back up. That 30-foot tall man that I saw, the shadow trying to climb the Sphinx, it was only made possible because there was this giant flower pot thing about the size of a Volkswagen or so, and with no apparent purpose. There's one on the side of the Sphinx, and no one on the south part, and there's one on the other side too. And but what happens is that when the sun hits the Sphinx, that little flower pot thing, um, I don't know how to explain it, but basically, without it, you wouldn't have the guy. The guy wouldn't have any legs, and his one leg is bent, and this guy's head's back like he's looking up, and but it all takes place very slowly, right? So my buddy said, yeah, he saw it, and he knew what I was talking about. Anyway, I found out a few years later that there was a 30-foot tall statue of Osiris. I'm sorry, archaeologists say that there was once a 30-foot tall statue of Osiris or Orion, same thing, in that very spot, um, you know, thousand years ago. And I think it was supposed to be in that flower pot, supposedly. But let me continue with other stuff. I talked about the Ben Ben stone before, but I had forgotten the name of the guy who had translated it. It was Robert Bauval. Robert Bauval is a well-known Egyptologist, and he interpreted it, and I said it wrong. You can look up the translation online, but I said it wrong. I said Lord of the Sky, but I believe he said it was the Lord of Horizon. That what this that the hieroglyphics that are coming out of this gorilla's mouth says something about the Lord of the Horizon sailing in the sky, and obviously a stone like this isn't going to sail anywhere, right? And then it said it's going to, land in the water, and then it's going to pop back up, and then it's going to become the foundation of creation. I think it's going to become the foundation for time travel, is what it is. My theory is that gorilla that you're looking at right now is actually, you see his hat, so to speak, is a bird, right? And which creates the feathers on the ape's back. In other words, they are one and the same. I think that's, as I said, Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom and knowledge. And my theory is that that thing traveled through, that's a space capsule. And when that landed in Egypt somewhere, the real thing, right, the real space capsule, when the Maya, when the not the Mayas, when the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians opened the space capsule, there was a gorilla in there screaming like, "What the heck's going on? What is this? And who are you people?" And so, moving right along, I just wanted to mention the name of the person I got the translation from. It's online actually. But the Ben stone is the nose cone, is my theory, and it's also the top of a pyramid. So we have we have a Ben stone, and then we have a pyramid, and then we have an obelisk, and all those things are connected, which is what I'm talking about now. So here's the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it's the largest of the three pyramids. Um, my theory is that the Great Pyramid of Giza is I'll say a monument to time travel. Here's what I mean when I say it's a monument. The Great Pyramid is a monument to time travel. When I went in there in 2010, and so I climbed up the shaft going to the King's Chamber, and was traumatized because I don't normally have claustrophobia, but in that thing it was just like giving me the willies. And so I got up the shaft and I went through the Grand Gallery, and then you have to go down on all fours and climb and crawl forward. And it's sort of like the, what walks on three legs in the morning and all that stuff. I think that's where they got that from. And but anyway, I'm sitting in the King's Chamber, and it was probably around noon, maybe. And there were maybe, 6, 7 other people in there. The King's Chamber is it's probably twice the size of the average American living room, maybe 3 times. But obviously, you're surrounded by all this stone, right? So I'm sitting there looking at the sarcophagus, like I wonder what happened to that chunk that left that's not on there anymore. And then I heard a 747 fly overhead. So I was thinking, well, yeah, that makes sense. That's probably the plane I flew in on the other day, because I remembered looking down and I saw the plateau and I saw the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx and stuff. And so I said, oh, yeah, it's a plane on its way to the airport. And but the sound of the plane got louder, and then it got louder, and then it got louder, and then I realized it wasn't a 747, it wasn't a plane at all, and it wasn't a helicopter. It was the pyramid itself. That thing was making a noise that, as I focused on it, it became louder and louder. And I looked around at the other people in the King's Chamber to see if they were reacting to anything, and they didn't seem to be reacting to anything. And the more I focused on it, the higher the sound got. It was sort of like a 747 engine, um, but not exactly like one. It was almost like the ohm sound, sort of like that. Anyway, so I asked, when I got back to the Sphinx guest house, I asked, one of the guys. I said, does that thing, one of the New Age people, the smart guy I mentioned to you before, I said, does that thing make a noise? He said, yeah, you heard it. I said, yeah. And then he told me I was a fifth dimensional being because um, he said, they say, I don't know, some dimension beyond three. And and then I said, well, how do you know that? He said, well, look at you. You look just like the Sphinx, which I thought was interesting because I had just taken a photograph of myself, my profile with the Sphinx's profile. And I was like, hey, I kind of look like the Sphinx. In any case, um, so, oh yeah, he told me I was from planet Vega. He said, your people are from the Vega star system. I'm like, oh yeah, I thought I was from Manhattan, and Queens, but fine. In any case, here's my point. When you want to get into the king's chamber, you have to walk like an ape, and you're grunting like an ape. You're bent over, you're hunched over, and I think that's what they're showing you. And then you hear this sound, at least I did, like you're flying through the air. I think that's what that's about. So this is the Grand Gallery. This is the easy part. You can stand up here, but before that you can't unless you're literally 2.5 feet tall. So obelisks. Um, Conspiracy theorists will call these will say these are phalli, right? Like Cleopatra's needle and stuff like that. Actually, this is one of Cleopatra's needles on the right, but I don't think that's what those represent. I think they represent spaceships. Um, just because, and they have that they're wider at the bottom just for stability, and they're squared for stability. But I think those things represent spaceships. I'll talk more about that. So the Washington Monument, the reason I think we have that is I think it's a monument to time travel. It's not a giant phallus. And besides, the Egyptians knew how to draw phalli, right? There's plenty of them in Egypt, and you can tell that they knew the difference between a phallus and an obelisk. So I want to talk to you about Michael Drosnin a lot. He passed away a few years ago, if not within the past year. But I want to talk about what he said about the Bible code because it's some really interesting stuff that connects with time travel. The first thing he said that really hooked me was he said he was looking for the key to the Torah code, and when he typed into the Torah code software that he was looking for a key, it told him obelisk obelisk, and so it becomes really interesting. That's right, obelisk obelisk. See, these are the Davenport tablets, and it goes on. Thanks for listening to part 21 of Chasing Time Travelers.